Well, good morning, Life. It's good to see you here this morning. It is the fifth sermon in the series of James. Turning your Bibles to James chapter 3. James chapter 3, we are in a series called Show Me. And the reason why it's called Show Me is because James is a book that it deals with the actual living out of the Christian faith. Throughout this book, as we've been studying it, again, this is our fifth Sunday in it. James it's not a book that tells a story. It's not a book that's really deep theologically. It's a deep that's highly practical. And in every one of his little teachings, he's got a number of these small teachings throughout the book. Each of these teachings is connected to the other one. So, for example, last week, we talked about the reality of faith and works, and that if you are truly a follower of Jesus, if you're truly a Christian, then you will show it. That you can't just say, well, I believe, but you never have a life that backs it up. Well, he turns his attention now to something, I think one of the primary ways that we as followers of Jesus can show a world that we really are followers of Jesus, and that is with our language. It's with our tongue. Now, here's what I know. Words are powerful, are they not? All of us can remember when someone said something to us that was hurtful, that harmed us. I mean, I can think back to when I was in middle school 30 years ago, and I can remember like it was yesterday the names that I was called, the things that people said to me that cut me down. I can also remember those times when people had, adults had pulled me aside and as a young child had poured life into me and spoke words of kindness and encouragement to me. And it's always fascinating to me how much we remember those things that were said. We can remember moments because words are powerful. Now, maybe you grew up, as any good parent tries to teach their kids, you've got to navigate the waters of how people treat you. And maybe you heard this as a child, or maybe your parent, maybe you did this to your own kids, but you know the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but what? Names or words can never hurt me. Now, is that true? No, it's not true. I remember, again, as a young middle schooler, and again, I think about those junior high years where you're not sure about who you are, you're embarrassed about everything, and I hated my last name. My last name is Rudolph. So as a middle schooler, and just anything that's different, it's like chum in the water for middle schoolers. Anything that's different about you, they're going to pounce on. And I remember walking into rooms, that I've never known before, and I would walk into a room, and they would be like, hey, this is a visitor. His name's Ben Rudolph. Where's Santa? I'm like, shut up, I was so bothered. But now, as an adult, I'm like, if someone said, where's Santa? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's stupid, but there's things that when people say things to you, it affects us. Some of you remember the harsh things that were said to you by your parents or by a spouse or by a friend or loved one. You remember those moments of pain, and that's why that's why James is writing to us, because what he is saying is this: our words, how we use speech and communication, is one of the most significant ways we show ourselves as different than the world. If we are going to display the nature of Jesus, the love of Jesus, the goodness of God, one of the ways we do that is with our speech. And so that's why we're going to look at this. And here's what I know. This is a problem that's bigger today than it's ever been. Not because we talk more, but because we type more, right? There's social media. We've got Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and I just read about two other ones. I don't even remember what their names are. I read about them yesterday. They're coming up. But the whole idea is this: there's more and more and more digital platforms by which people are writing things. And has our society elevated itself in the last 10 to 12 years because of all this digital communication? No. It has not. I would say our society as a whole has devolved. I would say the language that we share with people, I would say the verbal or the digital attacks, I think they're getting worse. I think the bullying is getting worse. I think the slander is getting worse. I think the complaining is getting worse. Everything that we do with our communication is devolving. It's not improving. And I believe that's true for us, that whether we go to church or that we don't go to church. We are being sucked into this vortex of toxic communication today. And we have got to decide, what are we going to do about it? James is writing to a group of people, again, who are followers of Jesus, who claim to be followers of Jesus. And this is what he says about the tongue. Let's read in James chapter 3, verses 1 through 12. It says this, "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways. And if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. If we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile, of sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water." There's a lot of things here, a lot of illustrations of nature here, but this is what James is saying. If we're going to be followers of Jesus, we just talked about faith in works, the way that we display our faith in a tangible way on this planet. If we're going to do that, one of the first ways we got to think about that is with our language, with our speech, how we use our tongues. And here's the problem, he says. He kind of shares the big problem, but here's what he says at the end. Here's the issue. All of us who sing praises to God, and we come into these environments at church, we come in here, we sing these songs. I love these songs. That second song we sang this morning, one of my favorite praise and worship songs. I love that song. And how can we be people who sing praises to God, but we will leave here today, and around lunchtime, we will slander, we will gossip, we will complain, we will use our tongues to curse people. And he says blessings and curses. He's not talking about swearing. He's talking about blessings are this idea of words that bring life. Curses are those words that bring death. And so these idea of blessing and curses, James says this, if we are followers of Jesus, we should be people who are known for our blessing. That we bless with our speech. We bless consistently with our speech. We can't just say, well, when I'm in my church environment or when I'm with my kids, it's going to be I'm going to talk differently than when I'm at work. When I'm with other people, when I'm with my friends, or I'm with this person, or when I'm with these ladies, or when I'm with this group of guys, that our speech is different in different environments. James says that should not be. We need to speak blessings consistently. And if I could summarize our entire sermon today, it's this: speak blessings consistently. That's what James says. Let's be people that when we talk, the way we talk, what comes out of our mouth is blessings. That because God called us, this is who God's nature is to bless. God's nature is to bring life with his words. When God created the world, he spoke and brought life. And we as his followers should be able to be people who speak and bring life, bring blessings to those around us. That is our call. We were created to bless. We were created to worship with our mouths. And when we don't do that, we go against the nature, the image that God has put in us. And so if we're going to speak blessings consistently, we've got to first go back to the beginning of this passage and realize if we're not doing that, if you and I aren't doing that, if we find ourselves in environments where our language, we say one thing at church, we come to church and we're all happy. Hey, brother. Hey, sister. Hey, isn't God so good? Right? And then we'll find ourselves in another environment like, can you believe it? And we will do that. We'll do that in the same day. We've got an issue. We've got a problem. That's the first thing we've got to do. Number one, if we're going to speak blessings consistently, the first thing we've got to do is we've got to acknowledge that there's a problem. We've got to acknowledge that there's a problem. We've got to acknowledge that there's a problem with every single person in this room. Let's look again what it says in verse 1 of chapter 3. It says, not many of you should become teachers. Now, some of you are like, praise God for that verse. When the pastor asks me to lead a group or teach something, I'd be like, Pastor, I'm just trying to obey the Bible here. Right? Now listen, teachers are people that have audiences. Teachers are people that have platforms. And what he's saying is, be careful not to want all the influence. Be careful not to want a big a platform, an audience that you can influence with your words, because what's going to happen is you'll eventually be judged by what you say. It's an incredible responsibility to be a teacher. But here's what I want to say this. I believe, again, going back to the social media, the digital platforms that are out there today, I believe this: all of us are teachers. All of us at some level are influencing. All of us at some level have an audience. And I don't care if it's 10 people or 10,000 people. What we say now, and especially through our digital communication, is out there for everyone to see. And I wonder if we just randomly picked one of you from the audience and we said, hey, we're going to log into your Twitter account, we're going to log into your Facebook account, and we're going to look at your posts over the last few months. How many of you are like, oh dear Lord, please don't do that? I mean, because we got to ask ourselves, is if everyone that read what we posted, if everyone that was around us when we communicated at work, would they be able to acknowledge that we were followers of Jesus? He says this, not all of you should become teachers, but verse 2, for we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man. Now, let's do a quick test. How many of us in this room are perfect? Good. None of you are liars. That's fantastic. All of us have problems. What he's saying, all of you have a problem with the tongue. This is a universal problem. When it comes to how we speak, all of us have issues that we've got to address. And because it is a common problem, I believe common problems are easier to live with. Common problems are easier to let slide. Common problems, if everyone in the group has a common problem, guess what we're doing? It's okay. Don't worry about it. I mean, just think about it. Let's just put us in a scenario. You're in your life community. You're in a small group here at Life Fellowship, and you go together and you build these relationships with people, and you meet your first gathering post-holidays, post-Thanksgiving and Christmas, and everyone's coming together, and what's everyone saying? I ate horribly. I gained 5 pounds. I gained 10 pounds. I ate too many sweets. I ate out too many times. And what is it? Y'all got 8 people in the room, and you know what everyone says? You know what? Let's make an agreement here in this room. No fast food and no sugar for like 40 days. Let's just do it for 40 days. Let's do, no fast food and no sugar. And it's like, yeah, let's do it. Come on. We're all in this together. And so everyone goes their separate ways. You come back the next week, and what happens? Then someone's like, guys, I was hungry, and Chick-fil-A was right there. And what am I supposed to do? And everyone's like, it's okay. It's okay. We understand. We've been there before. It's okay. And the next week, a few more people come. I was at a friend's house, and their chocolate cake, I mean, it is like, it's amazing. We understand. In fact, bring that chocolate cake next week to the meeting. See what happens? See, when we all have common problems and we share it with the group that all has the same problems, what are we like? It's not a big deal. Let's just all kind of forget that we even agreed to change this part about our lives. If all of us have a problem with our tongues, all of us are willing to live with a level of sin and a level of disobedience and a level of rebellion against God's standards and God's ways. And that's what should scare us. We have got to begin to take our words seriously. We've got to acknowledge that there is a problem. James is sometimes called the wisdom book of the New Testament because there's so many great sayings in the book of James. There's a lot of short sections that deal with actual practical living. Well, the wisdom book of the Old Testament is the book of Proverbs. And we don't have to turn there this morning, but if I was going to give you extra credit this week, I would give you an assignment, and here's the assignment. Some of you who are achievers in the room, you can go do this. But here's what I would encourage you to do. Go through the book of Proverbs. It's right after the book of Psalms. And read through the book of Proverbs, and every single time you see a verse that deals with speech or our communication, circle it. And you know what you will find? You will be amazed at how many verses you start circling. There are scores of them. And why? Proverbs is a very practical book. It's a book of wisdom. This is how you should live your life in light of God, in light of God's holiness, in light of God's goodness. How should we live our lives? If God is the ultimate in the world, how should we live our lives? And verse after verse, passage after passage, it talks about our speech, how we use it. And I want to read for you some of these verses in Proverbs. I mean, we could take the rest of the sermon and just read the book of Proverbs, but I want to just read some of these for you. They're going to be on the screen this morning. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 19. When words are many, transgression is a term for sin, transgression is not lacking. But whoever restrains his lips is prudent. He says this, the more you talk, the more you will sin. It's right there. This is just going to happen. Because you're going to be more inclined to say something you should not have said. The more you restrict your language, the more. So listen, next time you're at home and you don't feel like talking, just like, honey, I'm just trying not to sin today, okay? That's what you say. No, that's not what you say. But the whole point is this. The more that we use our tongues, the more capable we are of sinning. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Well, that's a vivid picture, isn't it? That when we are rash with our words, it's almost like our sword cutting people down. But we can also use our words to build people up. Then finally, Proverbs chapter 13, verses 2 through 3. From the fruit of his mouth, a man eats what is good, but the desire of the treacherous is for violence. Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. This is a common problem. Verse after verse, passage after passage, over and over and over again, the Bible says our speech, our tongues are a problem for us. And we have two choices to make. We either acknowledge it and we take it seriously, or we just get really comfortable with the way we use our language, the way we talk. We either let this become a way in which we know that we can reflect the nature and the goodness of God, or we can just say, hey, I'm just saying, right? You ever around some people and like, I'm just saying, blah, 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 blah. It's almost like I can say whatever I want, whether it's rude or crude or mean, because I'm just saying. There's some truth in that. And we just let ourselves off the hook. I think another reason why I think that the sin of our mouth is so prevalent is because there's so many different ways we can sin with our tongue. I've got a list of 6 things that I think are common according to Scripture of ways in which we sin, the ways in which we abuse our language. First one is crude or perverse language, whether it's swearing or cussing or just talking in a coarse manner about sexual things. That's a big one that the Bible talks about. Second one, complaining. I mean, it's just constant grumbling and complaining. You are known as someone who you never have a good day. There's always something wrong in life. There's something wrong with the sun. There's something wrong with the food. There is something wrong with everything in life. And it is your mission in life to let everyone know there's a problem. Right? That's complaining. We also have attacking, the verbal attacking. These things flow out of anger, and we just attack people, and these things can happen, especially within families. Husbands and wives towards one another, parents with children. But we use the verbal weapon, as Proverbs says, we use the sword to slice people down. Some of us are good at that. Slander. We just talk bad about people. We point out their problems, their issues, their faults. And it makes us feel good about ourselves when we talk bad about others. Or gossip is the idea of sharing something intimate, or whether it's true or not, about somebody else in order to make ourselves look better. We have slander and gossip, and lastly, lying and deceit. Lying and deceit. You see, all of these things, and I don't have to just explain lying, but the whole idea is all of us, there's a reason why we do this. And the reason why this is important to acknowledge is that you might be here in this room and say, man, I can't stand people that gossip, but you've got a problem not being able to tell the whole truth. You might be someone that says, I cannot be around that person because they complain all day long, but you have no problem tearing people down. You see, as long as it's not my sin with my tongue, I don't like it. But if it's my sin with my tongue, hey, I'm just saying. So we've got to begin to take these problems seriously. And we will not be able to do anything. We will not be able to speak blessings the way we were created. If we were created to worship, if we were created as people to bless, if we were created to make sure that we were to give life to people with our words, we will never change unless we first acknowledge that we have a problem. That leads us to the second point, and that is this: we've got to put out the fire. We've got to put out the fire. Again, let's look at James chapter 3, verse 3. It says, if we put bits in the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships. Also, though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire, and the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, set on fire by hell. In this passage, here's what James is saying. He uses all these illustrations of nature. He's saying, look at horses. You put these tiny little bits in the mouth, and you can move these massive creatures with just a tiny little thing. Look at these giant ships. I mean, they are blown by this massive ships, blown by the wind, and all it takes is a captain with their little hand on a steering device being able to move that entire ship. And look at fire. You just let like a tiny little fire in a forest, and if unguarded and if unchecked, that fire will consume thousands of acres. I mean, we see this every year. Every year, what do we find on the news? In the summertime, there's some fire out of control in Arizona or California or Washington State, whatever it may be. We're always seeing these things. And this is what our language can do. Our language has power. This is what James is saying. Your tongue has power. It has two kinds of power. It has the power to direct us, and it has the power to destroy us and others. It has the power to direct us, and it has the power to destroy us. What do you mean by it has the power to direct us? Here's what happens. When we sin with our tongues, when we slander, when we gossip, when we lie, when we complain, what happens is we limit our relationships with other people. If you were to talk poorly about another group of people, what makes you think you're ever going to want to be a part of that group of people? If you tear down that other person in your workplace, that's the type of person you're not going to want to get close to. If you lie to another person, you're going to have to keep lying to cover up what you said. So what do you do? You build walls. What happens is this is what he's saying. When you lie, it directs the course of your life. Instead of living a life of freedom, Instead of being in a crowd and not worrying about what you're going to say or who you're going to bump into, you can look at anybody in that crowd and say, I can get to know them. I can meet them. I can connect with them. This is what our tongue can do. Our tongue can severely limit our lives and our relationships. But not only does it direct us, it can destroy us. I mean, what he's saying there is so powerful. He's saying your life will be set ablaze by fire. Small, but powerful. When things are small but powerful, they leave an impression on us. I got a chance to see this firsthand this winter. This winter, had a mouse problem in our garage. You ever have a mice problem in your garage? I mean, it's the worst. And those mice, they're so tiny. They're so cute. But I hate their guts. Because we got this armoire in our garage. We've got some other furniture. And if a mouse sets up shop in a location, what do? They just wreak havoc. And I'm not trying to be gross or crude, but there was about a week before we found this mouse, and guess what we found? Mouse pee and poop everywhere. Everywhere. And we clean it all up, we catch the mouse, and guess what happens? There's another mouse leaving his trail of existence in our garage. And there's a part of me, in that moment, after about the third mouse I caught, guess what I wanted to do? I wanted to burn the garage down because I'm sick of this mouse. I don't know how many more mice I'm going to have to keep catching. How are they getting in? I'm looking at cracks, and I'm just trying to catch every single mouse possible. I got traps, I got poison. I'm trying to do everything I can. Why? And these tiny little mice, and I want to destroy them. This is what happens with our language. It's little tiny, but it just keeps growing. It leaves a trail. It leaves a wake of things. Because guess what happens? The moment you don't just complain a little. Because the moment you start complaining to another person, guess what happens? It's easier you're sitting there with a friend, you're over coffee, how are you doing? Are doing so? But my boss or my spouse or my kids or this, the government, whatever it may be, and we start complaining. And what is the easiest thing to do if you're sitting across from someone who's complaining? Yeah, I hate that too. Right? Someone says, there's something I got to tell you, and you can't tell anyone. You ever been in that conversation? What do we do normally? We lean in. I won't tell. And they tell us that, as the Bible calls that juicy little morsel. We're like, this is so juicy. What am I going to do with this juicy little morsel? I'm going to do the same thing. Hey, I need to tell you something, but you can't tell anyone. See how the fire spreads? And what we need are for people to decide what they're going to do when the fire hits them. What are you going to do when the fire shows up in your life this week? What are you going to do? Are you going to stop the fire? Are you going to stop the gossip? Are you going to stop the lying? Are you going to stop the complaining? Are you going to stop the attacks? Will you continue on with the cursing, or will you change the course of the direction and say, I'm going to speak words of blessing? See, words have power, and we need to be able to be aware of the power of our words. And here's what I know. When someone speaks these words to us, whether in any of these ways, we can either go along with it and stoke the fire, or we can stand in the gap and say, no, I'm not letting the fire continue any longer. And that will cost us. That might cost you some friendships. That might cost you some relationships, because there's nothing more awkward when you are sitting with a group of people and someone says, I don't feel comfortable with this kind of talk, and I just think we need to stop. You do that with a group of people, what are you going to do? I mean, it is like someone, grenade. Guess who's not getting invited to coffee next week? Guess who's not going to be invited over for the game next time? See, those are the things we've got to be willing to risk, but we've got to understand that the fire that consumes us, it will consume us our entire life. We will destroy our own lives. and destroy the lives of other people with the power of the tongue. I can't tell you how many times I've talked with pastors or other people, other churches, the amount of carnage, the amount of churches that have been destroyed with words is far greater than any churches that have been destroyed with bad doctrine. I believe that with all of my heart. More churches, I believe that Satan is using gossip and using slander and using lying and using complaining more than any other vice to destroy the internal workings of the church today, any more than bad doctrine could do. You know why? Because it's so easy. And the fire's so internal. And these churches just implode from the inside. And it takes people to say, I will not continue with this. This stops with me. We've got to put out the fire. And that leads us to the third point, that get to the root. Get to the root. We've got to acknowledge that there's a problem. We've got to decide to put out the fire. But then we've got to get to the root of the problem. And this is what he says, again in verse 7. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind. Now this is always fun for us. You ever watch those shows on Animal Planet, or you go to SeaWorld, you go to some other place where there's animals, and there's someone there that has tamed these creatures. They've trained birds, they've trained whales, they've trained dolphins, they've trained, lions, whatever it may be. And we pay money to see wild animals do these things. All these animals can be tamed, and it blows our mind. And this is what James says. No one can tame the tongue. What does he say? No human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. Now, when I read that, and when we read that, I don't think what James is saying is, listen, we're all just in trouble. There's nothing you can do. You're just going to have to figure out how to not sin with your words, just make it as little as possible. Is that what he's saying? No, that's not what he's saying. What he is saying is this: don't address this problem on the surface level. Don't be the type of person that says, okay, I'm going to really try hard not to speak in that way. I'm going to really try hard not to get angry and lash out verbally. I'm going to try really hard not to gossip. I'm going to try really hard not to complain. We can do that all day long. It's not going to change anything. And he makes this point because he believes the problem is not with taming the tongue, it's with transforming our heart. Again, the problem is not with taming our tongue. The problem is that we need to transform our heart, because he goes into this idea of blessing and cursing. And look at verse 11. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Saying there is a problem. If you both bless and you curse with your tongue, it is a heart problem. There's something inside where these words are coming from. And there's a wonderful study of Scripture, and I did it this week. And if you studied the amount of passages of Scripture that connect the heart with the mouth, you'll be fascinated. It's all over the Bible. It's all over the Bible, all over Proverbs. And Jesus makes the same connection. I want you to see this in Matthew chapter 12. You can turn there if you want to. We'll also have the verses on the screen. But Matthew chapter 12, Jesus is speaking here to a group of people that are attacking him with their words. They're saying that he is from the devil, that he's possessed by a demon. And so he is now going back and saying, listen, the reason why you can't say anything good about me is because there's something wrong with your hearts. Look what he says in verse 33 of Matthew chapter 12. Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or you will make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of the evil treasure brings forth evil. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. This is what Jesus is saying. I know the condition of your heart by the quality of your words. I know the condition of your heart by the quality of your words. I know where your heart is by what you say. There's what Jesus is drawing our attention to is when blessings come out naturally. See, springs, James is using this analogy of the spring. Springs come forth naturally. You don't have to decide like what kind of water is coming out. A spring is just natural flows, and it's usually fresh water. And so this natural spring of fresh water, when it comes out, it doesn't all of a sudden be like we're bottling fresh water and all of a sudden it turns into salt water. That doesn't happen. Because something that's internal to our heart has to pour forth what's really in there. And this is the question we've got to ask ourselves. What is broken inside of us? If I'm speaking, if what's coming out are words that do not honor God, if what is coming out is not blessing people, but what is coming out are words of death, if those are the things that are coming out, then I've got a heart problem that Jesus alone needs to fix. I believe what we've got to do is we've got to invite Jesus in, and there's some longing of our soul. Anytime there's something that we're doing something we shouldn't, there's some kind of internal wound, there's an internal pain, there's an internal longing, there's an internal something in our heart that desires something where we believe, I need this, God, I need to satisfy this longing in my heart more than what God can give me. Look again what it says in James chapter 3 in verse 5. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. I believe the problem in our hearts is this, that what is rooted in all of these things of how we use our tongue is the idea that I and my life matters more than anyone else. It's pride. It's pride in our life. It's pride saying, I don't care what happens to him or to her as long as I look better. I don't care how they feel. What I care about is how I feel. When we put our feelings and our desires and our wants and everything, our satisfaction above everybody else on this planet, what we will do is we will tear people down word by word. We will walk around with thrashing swords, cutting people down, wounding people with our words, and leaving a wake of curse and curses. We need a heart change. We need to understand that is Jesus who brings the goodness of life. It is Jesus who brings satisfaction, that every longing of my heart is satisfied in Jesus alone. We sang about it this morning, didn't we? We sang about it this morning. For every answer that I need, what is it found? It's found in Jesus. Do we believe that? Do I trust Jesus with when I don't like something going on in my life? Do I trust him to say, I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to focus on the complaining. I'm going to focus on praising and being grateful for what God's given to me. Do we focus on what all these people are doing and how they're treating me? Or am I focusing on how God treats me? And because of God's grace in my life, I will show grace and blessing to others. One of the verses I memorized when I was in high school because I wanted this passage. It was so impactful to me. It's Ephesians 4:29. And I've always remembered it. Let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building others up, that it may impart grace to those who hear it. Listen, there's only one way that we can impart grace to those who hear it, and that is when we are blown away by the grace of Jesus Christ. When we fix our eyes more on people, when our lives and our heart is filled with the horizontal, and we just see people and what they do and how they operate and what I don't like and what I do like and all those things, we will speak in ways that bring curses. But when my life is filled with the glory of God, and when my eyes are fixed on him, and when I'm in his presence, and when I'm filled with his well of living water, what will pour forth is blessings. I want you to see this quickly with me. It's in the book of Psalms, Psalm 73. That I try to pray through a number of Psalms every single day. And Psalms is a great prayer book. Psalm 73 is, I remember the first time I read Psalm 73 when I was soaping and kind of studying the Bible devotionally a number of years ago. And I wrote down by this psalm, daily medicine. Daily medicine. Because I believe this is just something I need to be reminded of every day. And over the last few weeks, I've just been going back to Psalm 73 over and over and over again. Because in it, it helps me. It helps me it centers my soul into a well that I need to be drinking from. And I just want to read it because he talks about the connection between letting our eyes being fixed on people and let that being what we speak about, or letting our eyes be fixed on Jesus and God and let that be what we talk about. Look what it says in verse 1. Truly God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet had almost stumbled. My steps had nearly slipped. For I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. Here's what he's saying. Listen, God, I know you're good to people. I have a theological foundation that God is good to his children. He's good to his followers. I believe that. But you know what really I have struggled with? God, when I look around the world and I look at my coworkers or I look at my neighbors and I look and say, God, they don't love you. They don't even worship you. They don't come to church at all. But their life is filled with no problems. And here I am. I'm trying to do everything I can to follow you, to obey you, I go to church, I bring my family to church. I'm trying to do everything right, and every single day, every single week, I've got problems. God, I look at their life and I say, I wish I had their life. Do you ever feel like that? Do you ever look at the lack of problems for the people who hate God, and you're filled with the problems of those of us who love God? It doesn't make sense to us. So, and then he goes on, verse 4, for they have no pangs until death. Their bodies are fat and sleek. Now, don't ask me how bodies can be fat and sleek at the same time. But these people have it, okay? They are not in trouble as others are. They are not stricken like the rest of mankind. Therefore, pride is their necklace. Violence covers them as a garment. Their eyes swell out through fatness. Their hearts overflow with follies. They scoff and speak with malice. Loftily they threaten oppression. They set their mouths against the heavens, and their tongues strut through the earth. Therefore his people turn back to them and find no fault in them. And they say, how can God know? Is there any knowledge of the Most High? Behold, these are the wicked, always at ease. They increase it in riches. All in vain I've kept my heart clean, and I've washed my hands in innocence. All day long I've been stricken and rebuked every morning. Now look at verse 15. Look at it. If I said, I will speak thus, I would have betrayed the generation of your children. This is what he's saying. When my mind is fixed on all the people whose lives seem to be really good, and they hate you, God. I look at how the atheists post. People are anti-God on social media, and you look at their life, and you look at their lack of problems, or just the people I work with, whatever it may be. And God, I look at my life. I'm stricken all day long. If I were to speak, verse 15, if I was to speak based on my feelings and my experience, I would have betrayed you, God. That's what he's saying. How many of us do that? We speak based out of our experience and out of our emotions. And this person says, I have to stop myself when I want to speak out of that. And what I've got to do is this. Look at verse 16. But when I thought how to understand this, it seemed to me a wearisome task until I went into the sanctuary of God and I discerned their end. See, what he's saying is this. When I come into your presence, God, when I come into your gathering with your people and I fix my eyes on you, you make everything come clear. You make everything make sense to me in my heart. It doesn't make sense here. It makes sense here. And I've got to learn to trust you. Look what skip down to verse 23. Nevertheless, I'm continually with you. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterwards you will receive me to glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And there is nothing on earth that I desire besides you. My heart and flesh may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. For behold, those who are far from you, they're going to perish, and you're going to put an end to everyone who is unfaithful to you. But for me, it is good to be near God. I have made you, God, Lord, my refuge, that I may tell of your works. You see, my language is not going to be marked by what other people are doing. My language is not going to be marked by the hurts and the wounds that they have done to me or by the injustices of the world that I see or that I feel. My language is going to be filled with the goodness of God in my life. If I am to focus on his goodness for me and focus on his love for me, and that well is filled up, my heart is filled up with the love of Jesus, how can I not but speak blessing? That is how we change our speech. It's not by taming the tongue, but it's filling our hearts with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the more we are filled with Jesus, the more we are amazed, the more we are in his presence, the more that he is at our right hand, the more that we hear his counsel, the more that we read his word, the more that we are in his presence and our heart is changed, we will speak differently. You fill your heart with the goodness of God, and you will fill your life with words of blessing. That's how we do it. That is what God is calling us to do. 3 questions, and then we're done. 3 application questions. Number 1, what are the fires that you need to put out? See, some of us, there's been some fires that have been going on in our lives. And I don't know which of those 6 things is your stumbling block. But maybe there's a conversation you need to have with someone this week. Maybe there's a relationship built on one of those that you need to put an end to, or at least confront. But there's some fires that maybe God's telling you, you need to put out this fire this week. Number 2, who needs to hear words of blessing from you? Who needs to hear words of blessing from you? Maybe you're someone who's used to, cutting down. And what God is saying is, hey, I want you to be someone who builds up. I want you to be known as somebody who builds up with their words and doesn't tear down with their words. And then 3, how are you going to fix your eyes on Jesus and not people? How are you going to fix your eyes on Jesus and not people? Listen, I would encourage all of us, if you're sitting there this morning saying, I need that reset, go to Psalm 73 every morning and just read it and pray through it. God, give me this perspective. Give me your counsel. Give me your eyes to see things. And let me speak out of that goodness. Fill my heart, oh God, with that. Listen, let's be people who are consistently known for blessing. That we speak blessing consistently. We're going to sing a song, phenomenal song to end the service. Let's not let the blessing end there. Around our dinner tables, around the lunch meals that we're going to have after this, in our workplaces, in our homes. Let us count how many times we can bring words of blessings to others.